Hi everyone, and welcome to Risk Awareness Week 2020. I'm joined by a good friend and one of the speakers at the previous 2019 Risk Awareness Week, Norman Marks. Norman, would you like to introduce yourself to our guests and share a little bit about what we will talk about today?
Sure, Alex, and thank you for inviting me and the opportunity to talk more about a topic we both have a lot of passion about, which is what some people call risk management. So my background is, well, first of all, I'm retired, or mostly retired. I still do a little bit of this and that. I was an executive with global companies for 20 or so years. During that time, I ran internal audits. I was also the chief risk officer, at different times ethics and compliance officer. But really my focus has always been on helping the organization to succeed, and that means understanding risk. So for the last several years, even before I retired, I've been speaking about this and writing about this. As you know, I've got a number of books out, world-class risk management. Then I took that up to another level, saying that the word risk itself is a turn-off for many people. And in fact, the word risk actually inhibits discussion, constructive discussion. So we should stop using it. And so I wrote this book, Risk Management in Plain English, which is actually directed towards executives to help them understand that what we're talking about is not something separate, it's not something different. It's what they've been hopefully doing since corporations and organizations were born, which is making decisions, understanding what might happen. So I wrote that book, and then I wrote a more specialized book, which extended my thinking about technology risk, making businesses a technology risk. So I've continued, I think, to evolve in my thinking and writing. And I'm in the process now, with your help and with the help of others, to put a book together that focuses the attention away from this idea that risk is something you need to manage or mitigate, and towards more about helping the organization succeed. So I've been saying that we shouldn't talk about risk management, we should talk about success management. What do we need to do to be successful? And success for me means achieving objectives, whether it's personal, team, business unit, or organizational. It's about helping the organization achieve them. And you do that by enabling the decisions that are necessary to set those objectives, then execute against them. But it's much more about taking risk and knowing when to take risk through, my phrase is, informed and intelligent decisions to achieve success. And so that's what I'm working on right now. I'm putting it into context in terms of running the business, because people have been saying that risk needs to be integrated in the business. And I know from you and I just talking that that's what you're doing in your company right now, is you're helping them understand that risk has to be part of how you run the business day to day, how you make decisions day to day. And I think as I'm working on this book, I'm expanding on that and hopefully providing a little bit more guidance on, well, if you want to make a wise decision, the first thing to understand is, why do you need to make a decision? What are you trying to achieve in this decision? Because otherwise, if you don't know why you're making a decision, you don't get the right information, you don't get the right people around the table, and it's taken from there. And we are making decisions across the extended enterprise all the time.
Yep.
And so I think decision making has to be put in the context of why you're making decisions, what kind of decisions. And risk management informs and provides the information necessary about what might happen, so you can make those decisions.
Yeah, totally. And I wanted to kind of pick up on your introduction and just address to all of the participants that are watching us, because I hope you're getting that there are a few kind of subtle messages that are coming out throughout most of the workshops during the Risk Awareness Week. You heard it in the earlier days, you'll hear it in the later days, and the messages are risk management is not what it seems. So if you just kind of Google risk management, you will find a lot of information which most probably will not be very helpful for your organization when you implement it. So this is kind of why Risk Awareness Week is dedicated to an alternative thinking in risk management. So that's theme number one. And by the way, I do want you to feel interactive and use the comments below this video. So do write your thoughts, your agree, disagree, share your thoughts underneath this video. So that's the first theme. Risk management is not what it seems. The second theme that normally you already mentioned a number of times is that, well, if risk management is not about managing risks, if it's not a discipline in itself, then maybe it's about informing and helping us to make better choices and better decisions around taking risks and taking calculated risks. So maybe it has something to do with decision. I think this is the kind of the second theme that is going like as a red line through every session at the Risk Awareness Week. There's something about decision making and the whole field of decision science that kind of underpins that may have application and use to us as risk professionals and to people that are trying to apply risk techniques or tools or approaches in their day-to-day lives. Because after all, Risk Awareness Week is called Risk Awareness for a reason. It's not just kind of a small gathering for selected risk managers. It's actually a set of sessions for people that do business most of the time, and they have to make those decisions and choices. So that's the second theme. And the third theme, final theme, is that something that you call success management, and I hope this is kind of getting across as well, is that risk management, it's not kind of an end in itself. It's not the objective, it's not the purpose of managing risks is not the ultimate goal of risk management. And it's about enabling something bigger, something better. And this is what you call success management. Would you say that, does that kind of, are those the three themes that are coming in your new book as well? What else would you add on top of it?
I think that's a very large part of it. I think that the new book is going to be talking about essentially what it takes to be successful. It starts with organizations probably having a mission or a purpose statement, and that might inform a strategic plan. But the strategic plan, unlike a lot of frameworks that assume that understanding risk is after you define strategies, actually it's part of, and it has to inform how you set strategy. So to me, risk management is about understanding what might happen. A very, very simple phrase, understanding what might happen and its effect on the organization, the environment, and generally the achievement of your objectives. So it's understanding, it's being able to look forward and have a reasonable understanding of what might happen and analyze that effect under different scenarios. So you do that in terms of defining the strategic plan. And if you look at how people do strategies management, a lot of times the downside is ignored and the upside is assumed.
Yep.
And so it sort of starts there with, a lot of people talk about integrating risk into strategy, but they don't really think through, well, what does that mean? And I'm not saying that necessarily the chief risk officer has to be an integral part of the discussions, because if they can train these strategy people to be thinking through and applying similar concepts around understanding the potential as well as the downside. And this is a theme for me, which is you have to evaluate both. You have to do it in a comparable fashion, And you have to be able to do it in a way that you can not aggregate or add them together, but basically weigh them against each other, see the net effect, to see the big picture. So then you can set strategies, and then you can set or strategic plan, and then you can set your objectives. And each one of these requires you to be thinking about and understanding what might happen. Do it looking at multiple scenarios.
Yep.
All of this is risk language, right? Scenario analysis, being able to use what is monte-carlo or other modeling to evaluate different options. But this is not the theme here. Is this is not the risk practitioner doing this. Everybody should be doing this. And using the risk practitioner perhaps as a specialist and an advisor, the expert on using the tools, or simply a trainer. But after you then set the objectives, they have to execute on them. You do that through decisions all the time, whether it's setting up the budget, right, and allocating capital. I'm in the middle in the book right now of writing about an example of capital allocation. And one of the problems that people face is that you have to make a decision. Do I invest in a new marketing plan, initiative, a new factory or an acquisition, invest in my cyber defenses, invest in compliance? How do I compare these, right? And if I'm not using similar tools to compare these and then to understand how it would affect my achievement of objectives, I'm really not helping the organization to succeed. And so you've got that decision. You've got decisions about who am I going to hire? If I take this person or that person, or I delay the hiring. So decisions are being made all the time. But what we need to do is to make the decision that is not only right from a, if you like, an immediate short-term ROI, but it's also got to be contributing to the achievement of our annual objectives, yep, and then our strategic plan. So it's all got to be within the context of running the business. And so that's more what I'm thinking about right now is if you can define the framework of how you run the business from strategy setting, objective setting, performance management, certainly, because if you don't know where you are, okay, you don't know what you need to do to get to where you want to be. And then build in how, quote, risk management comes into that. And it brings out other things. So, for example, a very simple thing that I was writing about yesterday. I've probably been in hundreds of executive meetings over my years, many hundreds probably. And typically the CFO will come to the meeting and put up a projection, the results for the quarter and the projection for the rest of the year. And there's a number there for revenue in the third quarter and a number for revenue in the fourth quarter. One number. What you don't hear is what's the likelihood of hitting that number.
Yep. And what are
the possibilities that it may be less? What are the possibilities that it might be more?
Yep.
And there's actually a range rather than a single point, but he's making an assumption. And that's not good information. You can't make the right business decision and determine what actions to make to achieve your revenue objectives based on that limited information. You need more. You need to know, okay, I'm 80% likely to hit my number because of A, B, C, D, and E.
Yep.
Right? Is that okay? Now, 80% you may say, well, that's fine. I'm okay with it. But you may not. You may say, I need to be 90% or 95%. And I also want a possibility of going over. So now you identify A, B, C, D, and E. These are, if you like, risks or opportunities, yep, right? They're the things that might happen. And now you can go back and you can start, okay, what can I do about these inhibitors or enablers. So, for example, if the CFO and the head of sales says, well, we're working on a major deal with this company in Switzerland, and we think there's a 90% chance that they're going to come in and make a deal for 5 million. And we've built that into the forecast. We're pretty sure that's going to happen. And the CEO says, well, what if I joined the team and we went out there together? Do you think we could get the deal from 5 to 10 million? So the focus now becomes not only on what can we do to prevent the downside, but what can we do to enable the upside and achieve even greater success. One of the things that people talk about, which always amuses me, people seem to be happy to achieve objectives. I don't think you or I would be happy with just achieving objectives.
Yep.
There's an opportunity to exceed them. So to me, it's and another part of this, Alex, is that what do the leaders of the organization focus on? Are they focused on avoiding failure, or are they focused on achieving success? And if we can turn our conversation, our business approach, to letting them see and appreciate that we are actually going to help them be successful rather than simply avoiding failure, they're going to welcome us in. They're going to want to have us in their meetings because we're going to be constructive rather than obstructive. We're going to be coming up with ideas and suggestions perhaps, or simply helping them to understand the real likelihood rather than just making an assumption based on optimism. So that's a lot of what I'm working on right now, is changing the mindset, changing the approach of the so-called risk practitioner.
Yeah.
I wrote so-called because I don't like that word risk. We can continue to call them that until we come up with a better name. Just like with risk awareness, it's not really about risk awareness.
Exactly. It's awareness to realize that it's not about risks. This is the kind of the theme. Listen, I had so many angry messages after 2019, and when I say so many, I mean I'm exaggerating. I only had 2, and I had about 500 of positive messages. But the 2 messages was, why did I join and listen to this? Because all of the workshops were telling me how I'm doing my job wrong and everything should be different. So I thought that was hilarious. I mean, to me, that's mission accomplished, because there's a better way to make decisions and plan and forecast and assess performance using risks. And I just wanted to kind of share a quick story. Literally half an hour ago, we finished doing some simulations on one of the large investment projects, and our analysis showed that there was a 30% probability that the project would be less successful than the baseline, than the management perception. So management have their own view. That view is single. So they're saying this is how much we will make, how much money we will make on this project. It's a single estimate based on single estimates in assumptions. Our calculations show that there was a 30. Did I say 30?
You say 30.
Yeah, there was a 30% probability that it would be below the management projection, and 70% probability that it would be above management projection. So in fact, management is taking quite a cautious and pessimistic view of some of the market forces that influence this project. And I mean, I thought that was just so cool. Risk manager coming out, and in the board paper, I have sentences saying there's a wonderful upside to this project if we take advantage of these risks. If we manage to capture the value and take advantage of that situation, which is wonderful. I mean, this is a wonderful message. I'm not only saying the project is relatively stable in terms of its volatility, but also there's a huge upside, which I thought was absolutely wonderful. But then the second thing that you mentioned, and I'm still working on it, I mean, this is my dream, is that I run simulations. I incorporate all of this analysis in the board papers, and we've already moved towards talking and sharing and thinking in ranges, which is wonderful. Our all of our kind of decision-making criteria are reported in ranges as a 90% confidence interval based on the simulations that my team does, and so we're already there. But there's one thing that I'm really aiming for, because I think that would be just the kind of the best quality decision you can make, is I'm trying to create models not as black boxes, but as calculators where an executive can see what kind of assumptions we've put in, what kind of ranges we've put in assumptions, and any executive during the board meeting can say, I think your foreign exchange forecast is a little bit off. I see it differently. It has to be wider or narrower, left or right. And he can literally change it on the spot. And within seconds, the 10,000 Monte Carlo simulations will recalculate. And it's literally, it's not actually seconds, it's milliseconds. So instantaneous, he would be able to see, well, if I change my view on some of the assumptions, if I believe in something, I can test this hypothesis to see how that would affect the decision, whether the decision would still be good or bad. So my dream is to make decision-making interactive in the way that you don't just you do the work up front, you run the simulations, then you show the result, you're saying this is the probability of achieving success, this is the probability of exceeding, this is the kind of the expected range for the downside, this is the expected range for the upside. I'm hoping to make this live and interactive so that any executive can say, I don't believe this, I believe in something else. Let's see how will that change our decision. Will our decision still be good after under those circumstances? So eventually, I'm sure I'll get to it. We definitely have the technology, which is the great thing. We have the technology to make Monte Carlo simulations instantaneous, which is amazing.
So Alex, building on that, your example, Hans Lesser, who you and I both know, was the chief risk officer at Lego in Denmark. And he tells the story about how they were introducing a new model, and they were bringing it into Eastern Europe first. And a number of assumptions were made about the take-up in different countries and the level of sales that there would be. And the supply chain was designed to accommodate that level of sales. But his team, through their work, was able to identify that there was actually a significant possibility, not only that they would fail to hit those targets and actions would have to be prepared and ready to respond, but they might exceed it. And it was both an opportunity and a potential harm if they exceeded, because they might not be able to meet customer demand, which would impact their reputation. And so working with management, they were able to be better prepared to address either a shortfall or an excess in sales, and to be of tremendous value to the organization as a whole, because they were ready to increase manufacturing, to meet an unexpected increase in sales, or to divert the product that they had in warehouses, say in Poland, back over to Germany. So they became much more an enabler, not only of decisions, but of the running of the business. And that's really what it is. It's about helping people run the business better.
Yeah.
And I see this as, we talk about risk and opportunities, but this is a tremendous opportunity for the risk practitioner. If we accept what the surveys are telling us, which is that the great majority, something like 80% of executives and even board members, see risk management as a compliance activity, something they have to do rather than something they want to do, okay, then we need to say, well, how can we make them want to do it?
Yeah.
We have to make it something that they want to, that they need our help with, something that we can actually turn their attention to. We are an aid, a trusted advisor, something that is even a competitive edge. So if we do that, and it can be a very subtle thing. So one of the people who read my thinking about the word risk as being a 4-letter word changed the name of his department from risk management to decision support. And without changing anything else, all of a sudden he was able to get in the door and spend some time, get the time of the executives, because he was indicating a change in his attitude.
That's pretty clever.
So to me, it's not only a change that we can make and should want to make in our tools and our involvement in different processes, but it's a change in how we think about our role. If we can think about each of the executives, understand what they're doing, how they're running the business, and the decisions they have to make, now we can see how can we help them make those better decisions? How can we show that we're interested in helping them to be successful? And that therefore will influence the decisions, the information we give them. And I think sometimes when we focus too much on ourselves instead of our customer, and if we think about the executives as our customers, and we want them to buy our services and our information, I think we're going to be providing much more valuable information to them, even if it's simply teaching them how to do Monte Carlo simulations.
Totally. I mean, just to reinforce your point, I have this hilarious statistic. So, survey after survey indicate that that the management is not really taking risk management seriously, or at least they don't view it as a valuable, important tool in their toolkit. And yet, at the same time, those same executives, there was another study by a group of scientists who I can't remember, but the finding was something along the lines, 75% of the time, executives make decisions binary. And that means do something or do nothing. And there's never that optionality which the proper risk analysis and proper decision science gives you, because there's always, in any project, in any decision, literally in anything in the world, there's always do A or B or C or D or do nothing. Do nothing is your 20th choice sometimes. It's never your either. No decision should ever be either or, because that is automatically not a quality decision. If you're just choosing between doing something or doing nothing, that's not optimal. And I just think it's hilarious. So the executives are struggling with decision quality. They're struggling with this information on alternatives and the implications and the risks associated with each of the alternatives, and yet risk managers are not providing that. So clearly there's a business need, but then risk managers don't deliver anything to meet that need.
Exactly, and there's another survey that I was looking at recently and posted on my blog, which pointed out that 75% of decisions are made by people relying on their gut instinct.
Yeah.
They don't even necessarily go and try to find the information. And one of the things that we need to focus on, and that always worries me, you seem to have started at least the journey of bridging this, and that is people need information quickly. People have to make, especially in this turbulent time, people are making decisions very quickly, and they can't afford to wait for a very thorough, detailed, quote, risk analysis project to be completed. They need some help to understand what are the alternatives, what are the results if I do this, what are the results if I do that, how do I compare them, and which is the way to go, and make that decision quickly. And sometimes you've got time, a lot of times you don't. A lot of times it's not a very significant decision, but a lot of times it is. And we need to be thinking about how we can help these people make better decisions. And if we can show them the tools or give them the tools, help them with the tools, then we are helping them to address risk, or if you like, what might happen. Because, and again, this is not something that is new. People have been thinking about what might happen when they're making decisions since the dawn of time. Well, except Adam and Eve, they didn't really think about what might happen. They just made the decision and bit the apple and suffered as a result. We suffer to this day as a result. But if they can have a better source of information, and if we can contribute to that, but we have to understand what it is they're trying to do. And I don't see enough risk practitioners getting involved and going out and talking to and listening to the executives and understanding how they make their business decisions, what decisions they have to make, why do they choose this versus that. If we don't understand our customer, we won't provide and make available to them a product they need. We have to do that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm kind of bragging, but I don't really want to brag.
Brag.
It's just a coincidence. I mean, I don't know how or why that happened. I was so fortunate in a way that one of the points the main shareholder in the company said is that he said, I wanted to understand where important business decisions are made and what sort of exposure or value creation, potential we have in each of the decision points. And it's literally one of my projects at the moment is to do a stock take of important decision points within the business value chain and quantify what sort of risk exposure, basically prioritize those decisions based on the exposure and the potential, both the upside and the downside for each of the decision points, which I just thought that was amazing. I didn't even have to prompt it. It's the main decision maker said, I'm not comfortable how decisions are being made within the company. So I want all of us together to understand which decisions are critical to the business, and we need to make sure that those decisions are done in a quality kind of framework. They're done according to best thoughts and decision science. And I thought, like, my God, this is amazing stuff.
So a couple of thoughts on that, Alex. So one of the things in examples I put in an earlier book was that the HR manager. The HR manager has a vacancy. One of his recruiters has left the company, and he's in danger of going over budget. So he has a choice. He can delay filling that recruiting position. That's option one. Option two is he can hire somebody fairly inexpensive and inexperienced. Option three is he can hire somebody more experienced and perhaps with some specialist insight into sourcing this particular role, which is IT practitioners, IT developers. So he's operating within that environment. Now, IT is his customer, and they need to hire a developer for a project. And what the HR manager does will impact their ability to hire the developer, and in turn affect the completion of a major IT project. But their customer in turn is in sales, and they need this particular project to drive this revenue program that they're trying to roll out. Okay, maybe not even be able to sell this new product because they need this changes to the existing programs. So there's this. It looks like a small change, but it can have a massive domino effect. And so asking about the major decisions will miss the small ones that can have a massive effect on the organization.
Yep.
Think about Deepwater British Petroleum, BP, and Deepwater Horizon. The decisions that were made that and eventually led to the firing of the CEO of BP, were at a very local level. Decisions that were perhaps not the sort of thing that the CEO or even his direct reports would know about. So any decision can have a major effect on the enterprise as a whole. So making that point, but then here's an opportunity, and I think there are tremendous opportunities for everybody listening, which is for you and everybody else, go to the HR department and the training department and say you want to help them develop and perhaps lead a training on decision making. Okay, and then
I've done by
roll that out as part of their management training program.
Yep.
Everybody is taught not only about the processes you go through and how to get the right people involved, how to go and get information, but you can also include how you use your different modeling capabilities. You talk about the need for speed or caution. And I think this is a tremendous opportunity to really do good within an organization and to have a much broader effect than simply focus on these clearly strategic decisions, because a lot of decisions are made every day.
Yep.
Whether it's sourcing of a raw material. If you source to the wrong people, then you have delays, you have quality defects. I mean, there are so many things, as we know, that can go wrong that have a major impact, much larger than they might seem.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I mean, funny you say that. That is literally the first thing I've done is, but kind of the lucky thing is we now have online platforms for corporate education. So it's much easier to once record the session and then just it kind of goes out to everywhere.
But the thrust is, again, we are not there to stop people from failing. We are not there to make sure that they don't exceed their risk appetite statement. Because even COSO, the advocate, the evangelist for risk appetite statement, says that sometimes it's appropriate to exceed it.
Yeah.
When the opportunity is there and justifies going over pre-established appetite statements, you go over, right? Because it's the right thing to do for the business. We should be thinking, changing our attitude, changing our name if it's necessary, and thinking about how can we use our tools and techniques more broadly within the organization, help them succeed. I am fed up with talking to executives in risk management, and I say, why are you not using your tools to estimate the likelihood of revenue forecasts? I say, well, that's somebody else's job. Well, if you've got one tools and techniques on the downside and one tools and techniques on the upside, how are you ever supposed to be able to compare them? Are you ever supposed to be able to weigh the pros and the cons, the threats and the opportunities, and make the right decision? Yeah. And that's what we need to be thinking about, is how can we enable success in the organization? And that means we have to understand how the business is run, and that's day-to-day as well as the big strategic things. And then we have to figure out what is it they need to know and how do they need to know it. One of the things that comes out in a lot of surveys of executives, and I highlighted this in my Making Business Sense of Technology Risk, is the information that is provided by the cyber people, the Chief Information Security Officer, on cyber risk. And not only did a survey from, I think it's Ponemon Institute and IBM, find that the board members said, we don't understand this. It's too technical. It's hundreds of pages long. We can't figure out what it means. They also said the person providing that information should be fired. The surveyors then asked the people providing the information the same sort of questions, and they acknowledged that they knew the board members didn't understand what they were saying. And their response has been, well, the board members need to understand technology. The board members need to understand cyber. We need to put a cyber person on the board. We need to put a risk person on the board. You can't do that with every source of business risk, with every source of opportunity, whether it be treasury and derivatives, or foreign exchange, or uh, investments in China.
Exactly.
You can't do that. So what you have to do is understand what the board needs and then give that to them, and don't bury it so they can't find it and act on it. And sometimes that means communicating orally even more powerfully than you do in writing. Give them the writing and background, but somehow you've got to communicate what they need to know so they can run the business or govern the business correctly. And I don't think, again, we're doing enough of that. I mean, you and I have laughed about heat maps for a long time, because heat maps are not actionable information. It looks pretty, and maybe it says what we are thinking. This is a high risk. Well, just because it's high doesn't mean you shouldn't take it.
Yeah, exactly.
And the people making these decisions need better quality information, which is germane to the decisions they have to make. And if we don't understand how they go about that process, we're sort of living on a prayer ourselves. We're making assumptions. We are not looking at how likely is it that they'll understand and need our information, because we haven't done the research, we haven't done the work to make sure that it is what they need.
Yep, totally. I mean, this is a question for everyone watching us online. How many high risks do you need for a decision to become bad? Is it 1, 3, or 7? How many risks in the red zone do you need to make a decision to stop a decision from happening? That is just one of the ridiculous conversations that I've had in the past, where people are trying to kind of apply a fundamentally flawed instrument to the right set of questions. And
yes, and let me just build on that.
Yeah.
How many times does a police car or an ambulance go through a red line?
Yeah.
Right? They go through deliberately because it's the right thing to do.
Exactly. And yeah, it's fascinating. And one of the points I wanted to mention on what you said is that risk is so focused on the downside and then it's somebody else's job. To me, this is one of the outcomes of a couple of decades of using fundamentally flawed methodologies, because there's only a limited number of techniques in risk that we use, and ISO 31010, for unknown to me reasons, decided to summarize them in one document, as if there wasn't as if we can't just Google, what are the risk techniques, and they felt the need to create an international standard out of it, which I thought was absolutely ridiculous, because what they've done is they've aggregated some of the good techniques with some of the most ridiculous techniques in the same pool, kind of pretending that doing heat maps is okay because it's in the standard. But anyway, the point I was trying to make is that there's only a limited number of kind of solid, good risk analysis techniques, and they're decision trees, scenarios, and simulations. And every single one of those allows the risk manager and the decision maker to see both downside and upside simultaneously. And they were always allowing to see upside and downside simultaneously. So literally anyone who has been using simulations or scenarios for the last God knows how many years, they are absolutely surprised by the conversation we're having now, because to them, risk is uncertainty, and uncertainty has both upside and it can potentially affect in the negative way or potentially can affect in the positive way. To them, that's kind of a given, because I've had those conversations with you a couple of times. To me, this is also a given. I don't understand why we need to talk about upside risk or opportunity or downside risk. Whenever I talk about risk, it's a range. That range has both the negative and the positive scenarios. That's a given to anyone that uses proper techniques. So those kind of conversations, those kind of comments that you mentioned, to me are really just a red flag, because no risk manager would ever say that if they were kind of doing proper risk management. It's kind of a hint that they were doing something wrong, something very, very wrong, where they're in a position that somebody else looks at opportunities and they only look at downside risks.
Alex, you're a very sophisticated risk manager, and you have a lot of detailed knowledge of mathematical techniques. And I'm a much more simple person, and I approach things perhaps from that simplistic point of view, which is, if we did things in business the way we did things in our personal lives, sometimes we'd be better off. If we're thinking about buying a new house, right, we don't only think about the downside. We actually will if we're looking at 3 different alternatives, how many people listening would have 3 pieces of paper? The first one, they'll draw a line down the middle, and they say the pros on the left and the cons on the right. And they write them down, and they say this overall looks good or bad. Then they take the second one, and then the third one, and then maybe they'd have some way of using their common sense and just basic intelligence to talk about, well, this one's closer to the school, this one is cheaper, this one has more room for expansion, this one has a swimming pool. And they make a decision, but they're looking at all of this, and usually in most decisions, you don't have to go to the level of building a model. Building a model, certainly if you're trying to compare a number of different alternatives, and you need that level of sophistication to draw out a cash flow forecast or a return on investment, internal rate of return, whether it's better to make an investment in a manufacturing plant or a marketing plant. You probably need that kind of sophistication. But sometimes you don't. And I would say that probably 80-90% of the decisions that are made in the organization would benefit by simply taking the time to do what you do when you buy a house. Take a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle, pros and cons, do that for each of the alternatives, and it's almost always going to be obvious which one is better. Now, you may not know this one is 50% better or 75% better, but you know it's better. And so you can just go down that path. But too many of our decisions are based upon old discipline, gut feeling, and a lack of information. Most people, 80%, again, it always seems to come out 75, 80%. 80% of decision makers don't even know what information is available. So if we can understand what information is needed, we can help them make those better decisions in order to achieve objectives. But again, the message is we have to know what those decisions are, and we don't need to give them extraneous information. We need to give them the information that is absolutely relevant to the decision they're making. And a lot of times we don't do that. We give everybody the same report. But if people are making different decisions, is it necessarily true that the same report is going to help them make their different decisions? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. So I think that there's an awful lot of opportunity for us to become a business enabler, a success enabler for our organization. But we have to move out of the space that we traditionally inhabit, which is our job is to help you, to stop you from failing.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, that sounds like a very kind of nice way to wrap up our conversation today. I just wanted to mention a few things. I mean, you're absolutely right. And because there's actually been scientific research that proved that by just decomposing the problem into smaller components on a piece of paper and writing stuff, and this is why a piece of paper is, you know, risk manager's best friend. Literally drawing some potential outcomes or writing pros and cons will switch your brain from system 1 to system 2 and will allow you to make a better decision. May still not be the optimal decision, but better decision than thinking with your gut feel. And just to wrap up on the joke, I am a nerd. I am considering buying a house, and I am building a full model. I've literally asked Graham Keith, one of the other speakers during the Risk Awareness Week. He's a risk manager. He's a mathematician. We're actually building a model together because buying a house is one of the biggest investment decisions an average person would make in their lifetime. I mean, compared to how much we invest into shares or metals or other investment instruments, I mean, the price of the house is double or triple the other assets in our portfolio. So I am literally building a model on that.
I just hope you didn't build a model before you proposed to your wife.
I didn't, but I did have a model for our wedding budget. And
oh, that's different. That's but the idea is there, and you make a very good point. Just providing a little discipline around the decision and providing the information put on that piece of paper can be of tremendous value.
Yeah, totally. Norman, thank you so much for yet another exciting and super fun session during the Risk Awareness Week. Everyone ask questions and comments, write comments and share thoughts underneath this video. And make sure you check out the links that Norman has provided to all of his other books and his blog. You'll be able to sign up there. And a lot of other useful information is underneath this video as well. So thank you very much. And we'll see you in other sessions during the Risk Awareness Week. Thank you and bye.